Hello, this is RPTV News. My name is Richard again. Today we're following up on the ongoing issue regarding encampment in the homeless community. Our guest speaker today is Greg Cook from Sanctuary Toronto, a community that is actively providing help and resources to the street and homeless people. So, hello, Greg. Welcome to RPTV. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty well. Yeah, just had a late night at work last night, but I'm doing well today. Yes.
Sounds good. Today, we're here to follow up on the situation with the encampment and the dismantle. Now, we've seen some police involvements. Is it possible if you tell us how did that affect the community and what is and just to update everybody, what's the current situation?
So briefly, there's a few larger encampments in the downtown east end that have recently been cleared or in the process. So the one at Sanctuary probably had about 40 tents and about 55 to 60 people were recently, almost all of them moved into hotel programs. There was an encampment, a smaller one at by the Eden Center by the Church of the Holy Trinity, and there was about 20 or so people moved to hotel programs there. Most of people that were at Moss Park have been moved to hotel programs. I think the city's saying over 140 people, maybe as much as 150 so far. I think it's also important to recognize that I've been saying this for over a month, that for every tent that the city is able to move somebody to a hotel program, at least in 10 and a half years somewhere else. And so while I think it's by and large a good thing that hotel programs are opening up and that the city is offering spaces inside for people, especially in the West End, there's huge encampments like by Scatting Court, by Lamport Stadium. There's encampments that have over 40 tents. And then there's many small ones in parks and parkettes across the city, both east and west. And so it reflects this broader kind of housing crisis that's been exacerbated by COVID-19. And so really the solution is rent guaranteed income housing people can afford, and really we're responding to a crisis that has got way worse because of COVID-19. And then as far as police, to answer your question about police, I think it's important for people to think through, like, what does actually policing mean? What does it mean to have a bunch of police around people who are living their daily lives, trying to figure out how to survive in conditions that aren't ideal? And so a lot of the police response is premised on a policing theory that kind of has been evolved and grown out of a theory that started in the 80s. It's called broken windows policing. And I'm just going to read a brief definition of that, and then I'll talk a little bit more about. So the broken windows theory is a criminological theory that states that visible signs of crime, antisocial behavior, and civil disorder to urban environment that encourage crime and disorder, including serious crimes. The theory suggests that policing methods that target minor crimes such as vandalism, loitering, public drinking, jaywalking, and fare evasion help to create an atmosphere of order and lawfulness, thereby preventing more serious crimes. So that's kind of like the theory, and a bunch of it's been called a bunch of different things: broken windows policing, community policing, and then like some of its methods, like it's called stop and frisk in the States, in Toronto carding. That basically people generally ends up being people who are poor, racialized, are basically stopped and questioned by police, and this is supposed to bring some sort of sense of lawfulness. But overall, this method of policing, I would argue, is really harmful to the individuals that are carded. It also is, I would say, very harmful for our society at large. So when people see encampments, people that are just really frankly trying to survive, the shelters are full, rent's too high, more and more people have no option but to sleep outside. Kind of the overwhelming police presence in those spaces actually erodes trust So like another quote that I think is helpful is, the broken windows theory always worked better as an idea than as a description of the real world. An increase in police presence has only deepened the wedges between local residents, this hastening neighborhood disintegration. Perhaps more than any other individual horror story or tale of distress, this is the most devastating and most enduring effect of the police department's pervasive use of stop and frisk tactics. Among other negative outcomes, stop and frisk has also helped intensify a greater culture of mistrust among residents of a system they are growing weary of. This has very real consequences, as local residents are far less likely to comply with police force they view as unjust and not having their best interests at mind. So it kind of, it just perpetuates this cycle of like not trusting the government, not trusting police, and causes kind of greater discord within our society. There's some bunch of lawyers that wrote an op-ed for the New York Times a little while ago that kind of expound on this idea. But police do not help vulnerable populations. They make populations vulnerable. Excessive force is the #1 investigative complaint against police officers, and sexual violence is the second. People with mental illness are 16 times more likely to be killed by the police. People of color, people with disabilities, immigrants, queer and trans people, those with mental illness and homeless disproportionately experience violence from officers, who kill an average of nearly 1,000 people. This is in the States. But again, similar kind of processes are involved in Canada. And sexually assault, physical assault, harassment, surveil, hundreds of thousands more. Mm-hmm.
Greg, I know how you mentioned that there are now these more and more housing options. These almost like the city of Toronto is acquiring hotels and buildings. What is like the most up to date? Do we have some numbers, and is it working?
So as far as the hotel programs, so that's hotel programs by and large are very new, kind of as far as responding to homelessness in Toronto. Previously, they've been used more for the refugees that were coming in and didn't have housing. And so not too, like about a month or two after COVID was declared a global pandemic, the city opened up 11 hotels, and that was a way to physically create more physical distance within the shelter system. And since then, they've opened up additional hotels, and again, mainly for the physical distancing of shelters, so that people could self-isolate, that they could be at least 2 meters away from each other. They've also opened up hotels, one in Midtown, one in North York, one in Scarborough, some temporary apartments in Midtown, maybe a couple other ones that. So maybe I'm not sure that basically offer inside space for people that are in encampments. So historically, when encampments were cleared, encampments have been cleared for years in Toronto, hundreds every year. People might be offered a shelter space, or no option at all, where kind of there's been a change where most encampments are offered a space in a hotel. These hotels are run, so there's a whole bunch of rules, so that doesn't work for some people, and I'd argue, I think permanent housing is really what we should all have. I wouldn't want to have a bunch of rules, but I would also say that having an option to hotel rooms is a much better option for most people than having to sleep outside.
I see. That makes sense. That makes sense. And ever since these, like the whole COVID pandemic happening, has there been any more spikes or any outbreaks because of, let's say, encampments or because of people gathering around?
So not that I know of. So we know that there's been within the shelter system, for example, which are congregate settings, there've been over 30 outbreaks. Cumulatively over 600 people within the shelter system got COVID. From the testing I know of encampments, so again, this hasn't been by and large done by the city. We had the encampment by sanctuary that no longer exists, but we had them tested twice. The one time we tested 99 people, including staff, and the second time we had 105 people tested. about a month later. And so the first time we had all negatives except for one positive, and that was actually a staff member. And so we took precautions, and they stayed at home for 2 weeks. And then the second time when we had 105 people tested, everybody came back negative. And I know that was similar findings for the encampment by Holy Trinity. They were tested. I think I forget the exact numbers. I think it was around 60 something. And everybody tested negative except for one person who had been actually staying in a shelter. And it wasn't part of the kind of more permanent encampment. So, and they were able to respond, like get that person the care they needed. And so I'd say that it'd be great if there was more testing in encampments. I know there is Anishinaabe Health is doing great work, offering testing to different encampments. So they'd probably give you better numbers. I don't know them specifically.
Now, we know how there used to be this supporters and opposers to, their encampments are safer, or people who just, I don't want to see any tents. Like, we have almost like the two sides, but how are things going on right now?
Like within encampments or in the city in general, like what?
Like, say how social media portrays, or how people are responding to the situation. Because one of the downtown building that's very close to the sanctuary on, I think, Charles Street, they actually had like the management system to email and notify every resident in the building that if they're against, they always have the option to directly email the city of Toronto about how we have this huge gathering. So in other words, simpler words, they were not really being supportive in any way. So I was just wanting to check in with you. Are people more understanding of the situation now, or how is it right now?
I think it depends on the person. So I would say overwhelmingly we've had a outpouring of support, and people on their own doing what they can to care for people who are obviously in distress and in crisis. People coming by to drop off food, people coming by to chat with people, get to know people who are in tents. I think in my experience, that's the overwhelming response. And I think people see people in distress and they want to help. And I think that's really great. Other people are angry and are frustrated that they don't want to see people who are poor and in tents, I guess. I don't know. I do think it's helpful to think through, like, I think often what people do is they see something like somebody sleeping in a tent or somebody using a tent to live in, and they frame that person as the problem, and they don't stop and think through, why is this happening? And I think it's really sad when people kind of problematize the person who's often the most vulnerable in the situation and has the least ability to make change. And so I think it's really important to think through why all of a sudden our housing price is so high, right? Why is homelessness in Toronto doubled? The number of people that are homeless in Toronto doubled in the last 10 years. And I think sometimes some people blame the individuals that don't have housing, rather than think through government policies that affected this, think through kind of changes in how housing is financialized. So I just really encourage people to stop and think through who they're blaming, and think through like what would actually solutions be. I think often the knee-jerk reaction is we need more police, which doesn't help the situation. And know that many of where encampments are happening, people are being displaced from their home because of gentrification. So like right by Sanctuary, we know that just on the 2 blocks that Sanctuary's on, that 7,000 to 10,000 people are new to the neighborhood within the last 10 years, and that's going to really disrupt the way things have been in the neighborhood. And what we're seeing with encampments in the area is one example of that. And so I think it's really important to think through why this is happening and not kind of have a knee-jerk reaction and blame people who are poor and don't have housing.
I think if there's a maybe more casual word is to be less selfish and to think about what others go through. That would be probably a lot more helpful as well. So, Greg, now you're from the Sanctuary of Toronto. What are some of the latest events carried out by your organization?
So we don't do tons of events. I think the things that we're focusing on right now is a big one is food security. So we know more people are without work because of COVID-19. For people that say are on social assistance, accessing kind of food, like food security systems have been disrupted. And so we were open for more meals each week. And again, it's complicated to do that in a good way, and not wanting to kind of be a space where COVID-19 is passed along. So we're only allowing 5 people to eat inside at a time. We also are offering things like our showers and bathrooms to people. Many public washrooms, and kind of frankly, you can't use a washroom, for example, at Tim Hortons. So wanting to continue to offer kind of basic things that people need. We're also looking at ways to support the many people in our community that are now in the hotel programs in different parts of Toronto. We also have a warm line. There's many people that are part of our community that are trying to self-isolate at home, and so are cut off from their usual kind of networks of support. And so we're looking to support people in that way. The other thing that's Sanctuary is currently involved in is the ongoing litigation against the city around the shelters not being physically distanced enough. And so we're back in court with that court case. There was a settlement, which is really great. But our team of lawyers in Sanctuary felt that the city wasn't actually following through on their settlement. So we're back in court talking to the judge about that. So those are some of the things that go on. Unfortunately, like many people, we've had to cancel kind of usual events that we might have, like concerts or like community runs and stuff like that, until things change as far as COVID-19. But those are some of the things that we've been up to.
I see. Awesome. And so is there any way that, let's say, our audience would like to reach out and help right now, where, let's say, the events are not available? Are there any ways they can help, like, this very minute?
Some things that come to mind, we're happy for donations, and many people are, and we really are grateful of that, whether that's in the form of money or water, Gatorade, clothing, are all things that we're able to pass along to people who benefit from those donations, sunscreen and so on. The other thing, I just really encourage people, I think many people I've talked to have said that the pandemic is sort of like a portal into what's really going on in our society, and kind of seeing inequality in new ways. And so I really encourage people to take this opportunity to understand what's going on in our society in general, and what life might be like for people who are living in shelters or living outside, and why that's happening, and why that issue is getting much, much worse, and many people are suffering and frankly dying because of that. So I just really encourage people to become more informed, and and talk to people about it, and think through ways that as a city we can do things differently. How we can maybe build lots of affordable housing, or stop people from being evicted. So I just encourage people to do that as well.
Awesome. So, Greg, you mentioned affordable housing and maybe even permanent housing. Are there any other, or do you see any plans for the future, both short and long term, that can be very, very effective against the issues we're facing?
Mm-hmm. So I think some very small glimmers of hope is the city is moving on building some modular housing, which is basically, I think there's about a 3-month timeline from like the beginning of the plan to actually building having units that people can live in. So I think it'd be great to have much more of that. Again, it's really a drop in the bucket. We know that the affordable housing waiting list is over 100,000 people in Toronto, and there's a lot of people, and we anticipate that evictions will ramp up as kind of currently there's a moratorium on evictions provincially. So we're really concerned that a lot of people will be evicted just because they haven't been able to pay rent in the last number of months. And so some other things that I think would be really great is if there was if they canceled rent, for example, right, to stop people from kind of being in debt and owing a bunch of money for rent and be in jeopardy of being evicted. There's some other cities like Barcelona is basically if a landlord has a apartment that's empty, the landlord contacts the government contacts the landlord and says, unless you fill this with somebody soon, then we will actually expropriate the apartment and give it to somebody as affordable housing. So that's an intervention that I think is really interesting to think about. Other places, they're expropriating hotels and turning them into social housing. And so I think there's some tools that the government could use and should use to make sure that people have places to live.
I see. Yeah, that does sounds like some very, very good options that we can have for the long run. Let's just hope they can become a reality instead of just dreams. So, Greg, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Not really. It's been really a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you. And I hope this has been helpful.
Thank you very much for all the valuable inputs and the information, Greg. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you too. Have a great one. This is Richard, and you've been watching RPTV News. Please join us again to learn about other important ongoing issues in our community.
Please do not forget to like, comment, and share to our channel. Follow us on all our social media platforms. And for more information, please check out our website.